You're listening to the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Brad Bizjack about how to achieve your unique version of success 10 times faster than you ever have before. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, a registered dietitian, nutrition business coach, and online entrepreneur with over 10 years of experience in online business. And I'm here to show you everything I've learned about creating a life and a business that nourishes you. On this podcast, we'll talk about the lifestyle habits, practical strategies, mindset shifts, and leaps of faith required to build a healthy body, a powerful mind, a strong spirit, and a successful business. Hey there, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, and we've got another great guest for you today. Now, I am recording these episodes before my maternity leave starts, so by the time you're listening to this, I will actually be on maternity leave, which is one of the benefits of having a team to support you. We're still able to run this podcast, even though I am not working currently, which is really cool. But I'm so excited for our guest today. It's somebody who I met through the mastermind that I'm in with James Wedmore. We actually have a fair number of my mastermind colleagues on the show this summer because there's so many awesome, brilliant entrepreneurs in that group that I'm so blessed to get to connect with. And I want to help you get some of that goodness on the show. So today's guest is Brad Bizjack. Brad is a personal development expert, mindset strategist and coach, inspirational speaker, and podcast host with over 9 years of coaching experience. His mission is to help people maximize their life, master their mindset, and elevate their relationships and career to the next level and beyond. Brad is happily married to his beautiful wife, Janiece, and they live in the Lakeview neighborhood of Chicago and have a baby girl named Lillian and a dog named Oliver. And the conversation we have today, I think, is really going to be inspirational for anybody who has ever struggled in their life, which I know I'm raising my hand. I have definitely gone through some things in my life that have been challenges and things that I've had to overcome to get to the place where I am today. And I personally was really inspired by Brad's story because I found out that he went from being close to $100,000 in debt to having a 7-figure business, which I don't know about you, but whenever I hear these kind of stories, I'm always very inspired to see what's possible in my life because it's so awesome to see what other people have accomplished, even when their circumstances were not necessarily conducive to having a lot of success. And actually, that's exactly what we're talking about today is creating success regardless of what your circumstances are and how to achieve that success even faster without having to run into so many roadblocks or be, slowed down on your journey. So it's a really fun episode. Brad always brings the energy. So I know you guys are going to feel energized and ready to crush your goals after this episode. So without further ado, here is Brad Bizjack. All right, everybody. Well, I am so excited to have with us on the show today, Brad Bizjack. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast, Brad.
Thank you for having me, Laura. I'm so excited to add some value today and chat with your listeners. It's going to be a great conversation.
Yeah. And Brad is like Mr. High energy to the max. So it's funny, like I'm sitting here like lounging in my chair and he's like bouncing all around. And you guys can't see him because this is a podcast, but hopefully you'll be able to hear the energy that he brings because I feel like sometimes I need it. I'm like, oh man, I get a little tired being pregnant sometimes. So
understandable.
So just so our audience can get to know you better, like just tell us about your journey to the business that you have today, because it's been really inspiring to see the kind of results that you've been getting as part of the mastermind that we're in. And I just love to hear people's stories about how did you get to this place?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to share that. So the spark notes of it is I graduated from college in a ton of debt. I was $92,000 in debt. And at that point in my life, I was saying, I just want to change my finances. That's all it was about. It was about becoming financially free. And I had a lot of really big limiting beliefs of not being enough and scarcity mindsets and all that stuff. And so I set out on this journey to just change my money situation. But what was really going on behind the scenes is I was actually trying to break those chains of mediocrity in my family history. That's what I was really going after, but didn't really realize it was at the time. And so I found online business. And I'm thinking, this is going to be the thing. This is how it's going to happen. And everything I tried didn't work. I would stay up late. I'd listen to the podcast, read the books, and I was putting in the action, but it wasn't happening. I would start to compare myself for other people. And I was always, Mr. Positive, but my positivity at that stage of my life was actually a big coping mechanism for my own insecurities. And I remember talking to one of my mentors, and they're like, dude, you need a mindset coach. What you're doing isn't working. Clearly something is not going right. You need to talk to someone. But I was $92,000 in debt and I couldn't afford a coach. But so, have you ever had those moments where something just like feels right about something? That's where I was. I was like, I need to do this. I know I'm meant to thrive. It's not happening. So I maxed out my last credit card and I hired a coach. And on her very first call, she shared something with me that changed my life forever. I was telling her how I'm doing all the stuff. I'm trying so hard. It's not working for me, but it seems to be working for everyone else. And she says, Brad, you're so attached to success that you're missing the whole point. You're under the impression you shouldn't be where you are right now, that these challenges shouldn't be happening. She said, Brad, business success and money isn't going to make you happy. It's appreciation for your life that leads to success. If you want to really succeed, you need to appreciate everything about your past, your business, your money situation, all of it. You need to find a way to love it because that's the master skill to faster success. And it changed how I started viewing business success in life. And so I started studying that stuff. And I remember it was kind of serendipitous. I bought a ticket to a conference out in San Diego to learn more about this. But in the month leading up to that event, I got fired from my job. $92,000 in debt, no income, no savings. And luckily I already had that ticket. And I remember like everything in my life was like going south at that point. I remember my girlfriend at the time, we'd been together 10 years. And she's like, hey buddy, like, what's going on here? Like, are we moving forward with this? And I just felt like such a failure. And I remember getting to these places of like deep depressions where I'd stay up really, really late, downing a bottle of wine and binge eating microwave nachos, feeling sorry for myself, watching Friends reruns. And it was like I was in these depressed states, but then I got like pissed off at myself that I was depressed at the same time. And I remember it was serendipitous because I remember landing in San Diego and going to the grocery store to buy peanut butter and jelly because I couldn't afford eating out at the time. And I went back to my hotel room and I checked my bank balance like I did 100 times a day at that point. And I had overdrafted my bank account on peanut butter and jelly across the country. And that day, the event started. And I remember walking into that seminar, tail between my legs. And the very topic that day was appreciation. It was appreciation for your life is one of the greatest skills to being successful faster. And I changed a ton of my greatest limiting beliefs at that event. I'll share some of that stuff with you guys today. And it just transformed how I view life, how I view business, and put me into this aligned state that eventually, within 3 years of going to that event, it paid off the debt, retired my wife from corporate America, went on to generate multiple millions of dollars in revenue in the following couple of years. And now we have a little girl at home and I'll never miss a single memory with her. It was that idea of appreciation that changed everything. And that sounds so weird, but it changed everything. And it was one of the greatest keys to succeeding faster. So that's a little bit of a backstory in a nutshell, but that's kind of how we got to this place. It was all serendipitous and just something that, a topic that totally changed everything for me.
Yeah, I don't think I knew that part of your story with the whole like overdrafting on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and being in debt like that. And it's really interesting because the concept of debt has been a conversation that's come up with a lot of my clients. And, this idea of, I need to have money to spend before I can invest in my business or invest in coaching. And it's been, on one hand, I don't want people to like just put max out all their credit cards, right? Like that's not the goal necessarily, but I think your story just goes to show that circumstance, if it does happen, I'm sure that wasn't your plan, right? You weren't like, I'm going to just spend all this money and not worry about it. Like that wasn't necessarily what you were trying to do, but it was your circumstance that you were in. And your choices were either to say, I guess I'm not cut out for this and I'm just going to go work at Starbucks or whatever job I can get, or what you did was you didn't give up and you decided that you were going to figure it out. And now you have this amazingly successful business and just obviously a totally different perspective on life, because you don't seem like the kind of person who is angry about depression or anything like that. So and the speed at which that happened is pretty incredible. Like you said, it's only been a few years. So I'm trying to think where I want to go with this, because I feel like my brain just kind of like exploded with all these different angles. But with the appreciation thing, because like you said, it might sound a little bit kind of like, I don't know, people could hear that and say, oh, of course, appreciation, right? Like, what is that going to do for me? So can you tell us a little bit more about what that means? Because I feel like sometimes words like appreciation, gratitude, that kind of stuff can start to kind of just go over people's heads, or in one ear out the other because they've heard it. But like, let's bring it and make it like tangible. What does that actually look like when put into practice?
Yeah, definitely. And it has nothing to do with the gratitude journal.
Oh, good.
I think what a lot of people think with the idea of gratitude or appreciation is it's something I count my blessings for 3 minutes in the morning, and then I get pissed off for 23 hours and 57 minutes the rest of the day, right? And that's how a lot of people go through and live their life. But this is really a state of seeing life as always happening for you and not to you. That's really what I mean by this. It's shifting the meaning of the greatest challenges that you face. Because if you go through life saying life is happening to me, and I learned this from one of my mentors, one of your mentors too, James Wedmore, he always talks about this idea of cause and effect. And what most people do is they look around at their life and they say, these situations, my marriage, my business, my money, whatever it is, that's causing me to feel a certain way. And they're taking the fear of changing those things and withholding responsibility from those areas. And they think that those things are the cause of how they feel, when really it's how you feel that's the cause of those things. And if we obsess over the effects of life, meaning our circumstances, we forget the cause. We forget what got us to this place. And so if we want our life to change, we need to focus more on how we're feeling on the inside, if we're feeling alive or not. And one of the greatest emotions of all is appreciation. It's seeing no matter what's going on in your life, whether it's painful or happy, it's happening for you and not to you. And when you view that, then any painful situation all of a sudden becomes a gift. I mean, and if you think about weightlifting, we go to the gym and we push or pull against resistance to sculpt our muscles, right? Well, in life, problems are the resistance that we push or pull against to sculpt our character. And so if we view problems as a gift, no matter what happens, it's happening for me, and we find the beauty in that thing and we no longer make it wrong, then all of a sudden it becomes so much easier to solve the problem. So it's not about just jotting down, oh, I'm grateful for my dog in my gratitude journal. It's about living in a state of appreciation and seeing life as truly a gift no matter what, even if it's painful. I'm not taking away the pain. It might be painful, but seeing it as happening for you can completely change your life very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think a really common belief that a lot of people have is that the people who are quote unquote more successful, that they have less problems, and that success and money and, business growth and all that stuff that we're pursuing is going to somehow eliminate problems from our lives. And I'm curious, being someone who's gone from, tens of thousands of dollars in debt to making 7 figures in your business, do you have less problems now?
More problems, just more
problems,
just more quality problems. Like as we solving a problem automatically opens up the door for another problem. And one of the biggest challenges that I see people face, whether it's in business or life, is thinking they shouldn't have problems. Well, problems are the gifts that we grow from. Without problems, you don't have a life. And so what I always joke with people about is your greatest problem is thinking you shouldn't have any. Because the only people that don't have problems are dead. They're in the cemetery. And so if you don't have problems, start begging for some, because that's a sign of problems are a sign of life. And so we need to see these challenges as a gift. I think when people get faced with a challenge, I think it's a straight shot from where they are to quote unquote success, whatever their definition of success is. But it's never a straight shot. In fact, there's a framework I teach, and we can talk more about it if you want, that kind of walks people through that. But I think it's when people see problems as a bad thing, they're saying this shouldn't happen. It should be different. I should have more money. My marriage should be a certain way. My body should be a certain way. And they're shooting all over themselves, right? And that's where most people exist. But whenever we make a situation wrong, we're resisting it. And whatever we resist persists. And so if we're resisting our problems, we're actually making them worse. So without getting too much into the science of this, there's a piece of your brain called the reticular activating system that makes you laser in on the things that you're focused on. And so, for example, if I told you to look around the room you're in right now and count up all the things that you can find that are red, like go ahead and do that. You count a certain number of things, whatever it is. But how many things did you find that were blue when you looked for red? There were probably none or one if you just happened to see it. But now go ahead and look around the room for everything you can see that's blue. And I guarantee there's going to be way more things this time. And it's not because that blue magically showed up. It was always there. You just weren't looking for it. And so if you are obsessed with your problems, it's all you see, when the solution or the gift of the problem is right there the whole time. And we're just so obsessed with what's going wrong and how it should be different that we're not seeing exactly where we need to be. Scott Harris, I met him at a Tony Robbins Date with Destiny event years ago. And he has a metaphor called feathers, bricks, and trucks. And going off of this idea that life is always happening for you and not to you, I believe that life is rigged in your favor. It's rigged for you to win, that no matter what happens in life, it's happening for you. And so Scott has this metaphor, and this will help with the problem stuff in just a minute, called feathers, bricks, and trucks. It says life trying to serve you will dust you with a little feather and say, hey, Laura, you should pay attention to this. It's an important thing to change in your life, and dust you with a little feather. And because it's a feather dusting, we don't really pay attention. We just kind of brush it off. We're like, I have too much crap going on in my life right now. I'm not focused on that. And so it keeps dusting you with a feather, and we don't pay attention. And so what life does, because life's trying to serve us, life's rigged in our favor, life is like, I have to get your attention. So what life does is it takes a pen or a marker and writes you a note and says, dear Laura, this part of your life is important to improve. Please do something about it. Love, life. And it ties this note to a brick, and it throws that brick through your living room window, and glass shatters everywhere. And now there's glass, your family's scared, there's glass in your living room. And what most people do is they're so obsessed with how that glass shouldn't be shattered. It shouldn't be that way. This is not fair that this problem exists in our life. When the solution is sitting right there in the living room, we're focused on the problem. And so we don't learn, and life keeps throwing bricks. And soon we have a whole house without any windows. And we look around at everyone else's house who have windows intact and say, no, they have it easier. They must have it easier. They don't have people throwing bricks through their windows, when the lessons are sitting right there. And we don't pay attention because all the glass shouldn't be broken. And so life is like, I really got to get your attention. And so what life likes to do is it takes a can of red paint and it writes the lesson on the front of a Mack truck, and it blares its horn so you turn and look as it runs you over, and you wake up in the hospital and you have one of two choices. You can pay attention to the lesson that life's been trying to give you, or you can say, I shouldn't be in the hospital. And it's totally up to you. And so the purpose of that metaphor, I guess it's more of a story, whatever it is to show that no matter what life gives you, it's there for a reason. And your life's problems will get louder and louder and louder until you choose to listen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I will say, having been through some challenges with pregnancy in the last 6+ months, I'm trying to think like when they would have started, a little bit more than 6 months, there was a lot of resistance to the way I was feeling, like just being nauseous and exhausted and all of that. And I remember the first trimester, like just being very distraught about it, because I was like, how am I going to work? Like, this is going to, totally screw up my life, blah, blah. And it was mostly based on a conversation with our coach, James, about, how the resistance to how I was feeling was actually creating more of a problem than the sickness itself. Like, nobody was denying that I was feeling sick. It wasn't like I was getting into this, like, I feel great, this is amazing. Like, that wouldn't have been accurate because I didn't feel amazing. But the amount of emotional resistance and frustration I was feeling and wishing that I didn't feel that way was actually compounding the impact that feeling that way was having. So it's, because I think sometimes people can get reasonably defensive when they're like, well, my problems are things that are really bad, and there is no lesson to learn, and it's just terrible that it's happening. And I do think that, in certain circumstances where maybe it doesn't feel like there's a benefit to that problem, at least eliminating the resistance can make it so that that problem is not worse than it needs to be, right? Because I think, resistance, like you said, it's you're avoiding the lesson in any case that a problem is existing, and you're also compounding the impact that the problem has because you're ruminating on it and you're thinking about it and you're wishing it was different, and all of that thought is distracting you from either responding to it or just accepting it. Because even like with the nausea, there really wasn't anything I could do. I couldn't take any action that was going to make it better. Like I tried, and trust me, I did all the things and none of them really helped. And it was like, I just had to accept that that's the way that it was going to be in that season of my life. And so resisting that acceptance for a period of time was actually making it worse, because not only was I sick, but I was also really upset about being sick. And so I feel like that's something that can happen in a lot of different areas of our life, where we have a circumstance that's, it doesn't feel good to be nauseous. It's not like a good thing. But to be compounding it with that resistance was honestly even possibly more of a problem than the nausea itself. So I feel like I've kind of taken that approach with problems recently, where I'm like, am I making this harder than it needs to be because I'm adding all of this emotional energy and frustration and like upset and, wishing things were different, when I could just accept that it is the way it is, and either I figure out what to do about it, or I just say like, that's just the way it is and I can't do anything about it and it's fine. I'm just going to get through it, kind of thing. So pregnancy has been an interesting journey for me to learn about, how do I handle problems that I can't actually solve?
I love this topic so much, about problems that you can't solve, because a lot of what I shared are like things that we can do something about, right? Like, for example, money, or let's say changing our health, and let's say losing weight, or creating a business. Those are all things where life's problems can accumulate or get louder and louder, and we need to actually pay attention to the lesson. But what about first, in terms of finances, one of my favorite quotes is, you will never get beyond scarcity. You have to start beyond scarcity. And same thing with emotions, right? You never get past these negative emotions. You start past them. And so what I mean by that is, let's use the example of anxiety. Everyone's felt anxiety before. What happens when we make anxiety wrong? We actually get more anxious, and we start having feelings about feelings. And so we become anxious that we're anxious, and it actually gets worse. So one of the greatest keys to lessening negative emotions is to actually welcome them. Because when you welcome negative emotions and you don't make it wrong, it dissipates faster. But what about the situations where there's truly nothing you can do about it? Like maybe it's a painful memory of the past, or something like pregnancy, or it's truly something that is not like necessarily your fault. It still is your responsibility, but it's not your fault. And so what I always like to share with people is a tool that I use called changing the meaning. And so, for example, let's say that you and I are walking into Jamba Juice, because why not? And I decide to open the door for Laura, and I'm like, hey, Laura, why don't you go in first and order a smoothie? And you're incredibly grateful. And you're like, wow, that's so nice of you, Brad. Thank you so much for opening the door. Is it because I opened the door that you're grateful? Or is it because of your interpretation of what that gesture means? It's because of the meaning you have given to the event. Because I could open the door and you can get all pissed off thinking I can get it myself, you pig, I don't need you. You would never do that. You're clearly a lovely person. But the event never changed. It was the meaning associated with the event that changed. And so what we need to do is we need to take a look at where we're experiencing consistent pain and ask ourselves, what's the meaning I'm giving this? And the greatest way to do this is to look at painful memories of your past. This is one of the things that changed my life forever. I used to have a lot of blame for people in my life and the way that I was raised and how it wasn't fair for the cards that I was dealt and how I was treated, all this stuff. And it wasn't my fault. Like no kid, I believe, would deserve things like that to happen in their life. And so I could go through life with a blame of that past event. But that's just a meaning I'm giving it. Or I can take a look at how I can shift that meaning. And I started taking a look at, okay, what would not be present in my life if that event never happened? I probably wouldn't be nearly as loving to my wife as I am. I probably wouldn't be nearly as hungry for financial freedom when I started my business. I probably wouldn't be as driven and passionate or empathetic. And so I realized something, that the worst days of my life were actually the best days of my life in disguise. that my pain or trauma in some people's instances actually have the gift inside of it to lead you to emotional freedom. And from adopting that belief, it helped me reinforce the idea that life's always happening for you and not to you. And that shift alone can change your whole life. It can change your entire outlook. It can change how you view challenges. So my whole point is that yes, it's painful, or yes, you are nauseous. It's not about taking the pain away. It's about giving the pain purpose that inspires you for something that's next. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it makes me think about that reticular activating system that you mentioned, where the story that you create about that experience can then be the story that you put on other stuff, right? So like if something bad happens to you, nobody's saying that that was, a good thing if somebody abused you or, something traumatic happened. It's not like, oh, that was amazing and so good that that happened to you. But if you take that experience and then use it to say, well, now people are threatening or, situations are dangerous. I can't take risks. Like if that's the story that came out of that and you're applying it to every other situation, that obviously creates a certain type of result. Whereas if you take a different interpretation from it, like you said, maybe it's, I'll always treat people with compassion because I wasn't treated with compassion, or, I'm going to work towards financial freedom because I grew up in a household that was constantly in financial scarcity. Then you're looking for opportunity. You're looking for ways to live that belief out. And then that creates a different outcome, right? So I think it's like even the story itself can be something that you're looking for evidence to either reinforce or change, right? Like it's either that happened to me, so that's how life is, or that happened to me and this is how I'm going to respond to it. And I do think that unfortunately the way trauma works, from my somewhat limited knowledge about it, we're prone to creating negative stories about it and to get into that like more fight or flight type of response and defense mode and that kind of thing. And that's just how our brains are wired. So, we're kind of having to fight against that when we choose a different path. But I know it's possible to choose a different way of perceiving things, and repeating that perception that's in a more constructive way can then create those new pathways in your brain so that is the automatic response, as opposed to, what might just naturally develop from a bad experience, where the automatic response is the world is dangerous and people suck and, all the different things that can come from that.
Spot on. I mean, if you think about it, like if we step into the common sense corner, millions of years ago, we weren't worried about building a business or financial freedom. We were worried about the saber-toothed tiger that was hiding in the bushes that was going to eat our baby, right? Like that, we have a natural survival-based brain. And if we don't rewire that, then we're not going to have the success that we want. If we live our life in fight or flight, whatever you search for, you will find. And so this is actually why the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, because your stories or your beliefs is the inception of everything. And so if I have a belief, let's use the example of money. Let's say that I have a belief that money is hard to make, right? And that used to be my belief. Well, then from that place, I step into less power, less potential. Therefore, I take less or uninspired action and therefore get really bad results, which reinforces my belief that money is hard to make. And it goes down and down and down and down and down. But with a new story, something like money is an ever flowing, ever abundant resource, right? That changes the power and potential I tap into. It changes the actions I take. It changes the results I get, and therefore reinforces the belief that money is an ever flowing, abundant resource. So whatever your stories are, literally just compound on top of each other. And it either makes you go down and down and down, or up and up and up. And so that's what we need to reverse. That's the biggest thing we need to rewire.
Yeah. And I want to remind people, as we're saying, that our brains are not naturally wired to do this. So if you're struggling with it, or this has been something that you notice yourself, like maybe you'll start to change, but then get back into that negativity. Negativity is kind of the default state of our brains, unfortunately. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or that something's wrong with you or that you're never going to be successful. It's just recognizing that if left to its own devices, that's the story your brain's going to come up with. And so what we're talking about today is something that takes practice and intentionality. And, it's not always this perfect, like I just flip a switch and all of a sudden now I'm like this positive mindset, nothing bothers me. I'm, everything's a lesson and abundance and all of that. So I just want to really remind people who might hear what we're saying and feel like, well, I just automatically think negatively, or that's my tendency is to think negatively. I just want to make sure people know that that's normal, that that's the way that your brain would respond. And that doesn't mean it's unchangeable or that that's your destiny. It just means you might have to work a little harder to get into that state of thinking in a different way, having different beliefs, perceiving the world differently. And it's not going to just be this like automatic, now my life is totally different and all of my thoughts are different and I never struggle with a negative thought ever, because it doesn't usually work like that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it is our default setting to be negative. And so I think a lot of people get defeated like, well, this is just kind of how it is for me. But there's some steps that we can take to actually make that happen. I'm happy to share a couple of those if you want. But there's some steps we can take to make that happen. And it's just about reframing a couple of things that make getting from that place of negativity to positivity, not toxic positivity where we pretend everything is woohoo, peachy, but genuine, true optimism. There's 3 things that I have found. It's better expressed in a metaphor. I call it success GPS. And it's a metaphor that can kind of help take you from that place to a more uplifted, inspired place. And so if you want, I can go into that.
Yeah, sounds great.
So I like hiking a lot. That has to do with GPS. I like hiking a lot. It's one of my favorite activities. And every couple of years, my buddies and I go on a road trip. And we backpacked the Grand Canyon rim to rim this past summer, and we were driving from Grand Canyon to Yosemite. And I remember talking to my buddy Jim, and he was like, Brad, success is a lot like these road trips. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, if you're not excited about the destination, you have no excitement or reason to drive across the country to get there. And you ever have one of those moments where it's like a complete download of like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is how I have to teach. This is all. And it was this amazing download of information to be able to serve people. And I realized that success is a lot like Google Maps. And so if we're reframing our mindset from this negative place to a more inspired place to have it be more natural, I want you to think about your mind like Google Maps. So let's say I live in Chicago and I want to go on a road trip. What's the first thing that GPS needs? What do I need to type into GPS?
The destination.
The destination. Absolutely. You need to type in the destination. And here's what most people do in their life. They type in a destination based on the current amount of gas they have in the tank. And that is why they don't thrive. Because if you type in a destination that's based on what you currently think you're capable of, then you're not going to be inspired to make the trip. You're going to be like, oh, here we go. I got to do this. So if you've ever had goals that seem to evade you, or a goal that you set and you keep on missing it, or it's a goal that you set year after year after year and you want it, but you just don't care. It's not that you're unmotivated or lazy. It's that your goals are too small. Because if you're let's say that I live in Chicago and I type in a GPS destination based on the amount of gas I have in my tank. So let's say 300 miles. That puts me at a cornfield in the middle of Iowa. Now, no offense to cornfields if you find that beautiful, but if I'm going to go on a hiking trip, I want to be inspired. I want to see waterfalls and granite peaks and all this stuff. I want to go to Yosemite. That's where I want to go to. I want to drive across the country to Yosemite. So if I type in Yosemite National Park, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm so excited to drive through all of the corn to get there. But if I only type in a destination based on the amount of gas I have in the tank, I'm going to get 30 miles in and want to turn around and come home. So if you've ever started on a goal and been like, what's the point? Or maybe start on a nutrition plan and then you don't stick with it, it's likely because the goal doesn't actually inspire you. So what I actually tell people to do is, what would a goal do for you? And does that set your soul on fire? If the answer to that is no, your destination is not inspiring enough. We need to set it. One of the biggest problems I see business owners and just people in general do is they set goals based on their past failures. And if you set goals based on your past failures, then all you're doing is focusing on your past failures, reticular activating system. You just create more of the same. So I always tell people that your goals should be unrealistic. I always tell people that your goals should be scary and something that makes your heart beat a little bit faster. And so we need a destination that's actually compelling, because if your destination or your vision of the future is not compelling, then all you'll focus on is the problems of the present. But when your destination becomes really, really exciting, then all of a sudden you're not focused on those problems anymore. You're actually moved to go through all the things that will get you to that destination. So that's the first piece that we need if we're going to reverse this. Before I go into the second piece, does that make sense so far?
Yeah. And I think some people that I work with, and I think this has been an issue for me too, the goal that you have has some kind of negativity attached to it, right? Like you were saying a little while ago, to make money, it means you have to work really hard. And that's been a belief that I've been working on myself lately, is this idea that for us to grow our business means I have to work harder. And my core values are not aligned with being on the computer working all the time. So that's been one that I've been working on detaching, because I mean, our business is doing well and I know that we have more potential. And there is that belief that I have that it's like, well, if we're going to grow, it's going to take more of me. And so, really the last year and a half has been me working on dismantling that attachment. And so I just wanted to add that, these amazing goals that you want to set for yourself, if you feel like, again, you're feeling, and maybe I already jumped the gun if this is part of your model, but if you're finding yourself either self-sabotaging or procrastinating, or just like, you're like, well, I want this, but it's not happening. It could be because there's some kind of belief you have about the cost of reaching that goal that is holding you back from actually doing what it would take to get there. So I just wanted to point that out, because I know for me, I like to set big goals and I'm not worried about not hitting them. Like I'm fairly detached from the actual result, but I do think there's still that little hook in me that's like, well, if I want to have a 7-figure business, it's going to mean I have to work harder. And I don't like working all the time. I like my, lifestyle and my freedom and all of that. So I just wanted to throw that out there as another thing to consider, because sometimes we don't realize that the goals we're setting have that side belief that's actually derailing us.
That's spot on. There's two big things that prevent people from setting those huge goals. One is attachment, like you talked about, and two is inner conflict. And so attachment is, I am my results, right? I'm only happy if I get to that big goal. I am whatever happens. And the challenge with that is we're basing our worth on a moving target, because we'll always want more. And so we never feel like we're enough. And so that's one of the reasons we get in the way. So once we realize I'm already enough, I don't need a goal to be enough. I am who I am. And my goal is just a really cool thing I'm trying to achieve and become something more. And you get detached, right? Detachment is not that you should own nothing. It's that nothing should own you. And so if you get detached from an outcome, the second thing that needs to happen is we need to break inner conflicts. Inner conflict is exactly what you said about maybe a belief that's stopping you, or pain associated with a big goal. For example, a lot of people want success, but they also want to avoid rejection. And so if you think about the inner conflict of that, right? Success, rejection. Well, like you said earlier, we're wired to avoid pain. Everything we do is driven by our need to avoid pain or gain pleasure. We'd likely do more to avoid pain. If you think about it, would you rather do more to save up $50,000 or prevent $50,000 from getting stolen from you? You're wired to avoid pain. And so if you have success, pleasure, and you want success, that's pleasure, and you want to avoid pain or avoid rejection, pain, you're going to do more to avoid rejection than you are to get success. And so that's a conflict we will need to resolve. We need to shift our beliefs about, in that example, rejection, to get to that end goal. And one of the things that kind of gets in the way, that is actually kind of perfectly leads in the second point, which is that GPS also needs to know your existing location. Like your actual existing location. We talked about stories today that we tell ourselves about our circumstances. We make things worse than they actually are. And so if I'm in Chicago and I have this huge dream and this huge vision, I've gotten rid of the attachment, I've gotten rid of the inner conflict, and I have this huge dream. What a lot of people do is they tell themselves stories about their existing circumstances that make it seem worse than it actually is. So if I'm in Chicago and I'm saying, well, I'll never be able to get there, or I'm a bad business owner, or I'm not a good leader, or insert story, what you're doing is you're telling GPS that you're further back than you actually are. So GPS thinks you're in Buffalo, New York, driving to Yosemite instead of in Chicago. And so it might spit out a route for you to follow, and you're driving and it says turn left on Chalmers Street or whatever. And you're like, what the heck? There is no Chalmers Street. And so you drive around aimlessly in circles for a couple of hours and end up going home to everything you've ever known. And this is what most people do, because they're telling themselves stories about their existing circumstances, making it worse than it actually is. Then it just gets confusing, and we have this big goal and big dream, but it feels like we're wandering around aimlessly to get there. So a great leader sees things as they are, not worse than they are. So we need an objective view of our life. This is the actual amount of money I have. This is the size of my business. This is my current weight. This is where I'm at, and for whatever goal, without a story attached to that objective fact. And if you start there from, okay, these are the cards I'm dealt, this is where I'm at, then you can actually chart a course to get to where you want to be. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I do find that, there's the people who are very hard on themselves and kind of live in that. And then there's the people who, because they don't want to be hard on themselves, they just avoid looking at their circumstances, right? You were mentioning looking at your bank account like 1,000 times a day. Then there's the people who just don't even look at the bank account because they're like, I don't want to know what's going on. And I feel like both are kind of the opposite sides of the same coin, where it's like you're not willing to be honest about your current circumstances and just be objective about them. Because, I do find that there's this trend, and this is in the health space and I think also the business space, where there's this trend to just be like, I'm not going to, try to change, because to change means I have to like believe that there's something wrong with me. And I don't think you have to believe that there's something wrong with you to desire change, right? Like you can say the circumstance that I'm in is not what I want to be in anymore. And there's this other circumstance, this other outcome that I want to achieve. And I have to look honestly at, how am I operating currently? Like, what are my actions? What are my beliefs that are creating my current circumstance that need to change? And it doesn't have to be the situation where you're beating yourself up about it. So I feel like the avoidance of reality can show up as just this like obliviousness to the actual cause of the challenges or the cause of the problems you're experiencing, as well as that way overcritical kind of mindset where you're just like beating yourself up all the time.
That's so spot on. And I think a lot of people will say, like, let's say we're dissatisfied with the situation, we want to improve it. A lot of people they'll make dissatisfaction wrong. Like, I shouldn't be dissatisfied. I shouldn't want more. And so they beat themselves up for wanting more. Or like you said, they avoid their existing circumstances. Well, if following this metaphor, that's like, if we're in Chicago and we want to drive to Yosemite, that's like saying I'm already in Denver. And so you could still type in that route from Denver to Yosemite, but if you're in Chicago, it won't matter what comes out. You'll feel confused. And so avoidance, like I should say ignorance, people always say ignorance is bliss. No, ignorance is pain. And so what's going to happen is if we're ignorant of our existing situation, we'll notice the same pain just keeps on happening. This dull, achy thing where you want to expand and grow into more. We just feel like this is the way it is. So I highly recommend not avoiding your circumstances either. And so let's say we're honest with ourselves. Let's say we're honest about where we're at and the circumstances we want to change. And we have these huge goals and dreams that excite us. So we're not beating ourselves up for our current circumstances, and we're pulled by a beautiful vision. The final piece of this whole idea is the drive. Because what most people think is when they start on this journey, it's going to be a straight shot from Chicago to Yosemite. And so I live in Chicago. Traffic sucks here. And so at the beginning, before you get out of the city, it's likely very slow. You're starting and you're excited for this big dream, this big goal, but it's moving really, really slow. There's a lot of stop signs and stoplights and left turns and right turns and speed bumps as you're getting this thing going. And that is part of the journey that you signed up for. And if you make that wrong, then you're just going to want to go home and never drive again. So you stay in the exact same spots. On this journey, there's also different speed limits. There are times when you're going where the speed limit is 20 miles an hour. And if you try to go 70 and a 20, you're going to run over someone. And vice versa. If you go 20 and a 70, then you're lying to yourself about what you're capable of, and you're going to get a ticket. And on this journey, let's say you get out of town, you're going to have to, I don't know if I want to tell this story. Can I get really, really gross for a minute?
Sure.
Like super gross. So on this journey, you're going to have to stop to pee. You're going to have to stop to pee on this journey. And it's going to actually get gross in a second. What most people do on their drive from where they are to where they want to be is they're like, I need to get there. I'll be happy when I have to drive and never stop. And so I have to get there as soon as possible. So I never pull off the highway to go to the bathroom and get something to eat. Well, one time I was driving actually from Chicago to Dallas for this men's retreat. And I was like, I need to get there. It's a 17-hour drive. I need to get there as fast as I can. I calculated if I don't stop for bathroom breaks and instead pee into a urinal, like a portable urinal while I'm driving, I can shave like an hour or two off my time. And so me being naive and stupid, I did that. And what I did is I was going 75 miles an hour. And I peed into my portable urinal. I rolled down the window while I was going 75 and poured my pee out the window. And what happened next, Laura? I peed on my own face.
Oh my gosh.
And so I told you it's going to get gross. But the point of this is that this is what most people do on the journey to success. They pee on their own face because they're not willing to stop and get out of the car and stretch their legs and rejuvenate and get a bite to eat. They're like, I need to get there now. So they end up causing themselves more damage on their path. And so just stop and go pee. And on this journey, you're also going to need to refill the tank. Like we said, if you set a small goal, you'll go to that one place and then turn around and go home. But if this vision is compelling enough, you'll have to fill up the tank multiple times to get there. Now, what's that an example of? What that is a metaphor for is like getting into masterminds or having wonderful conversations with a coach or signing up for coaching or things like that. If the vision is compelling enough, it's worth paying for gas. It's worth signing up for coaching. It's worth joining the mastermind. It's worth getting in those environments, going to that seminar, buying that course, because that's what will get you to that ultimate destination or destiny that you want to go to. And then you're going to be on this journey and you're going to notice that there's different topography. Sometimes it's flat and you're cruising. Sometimes to go the same speed up a mountain, you have to floor it and put in more intentionality, more effort than you were before. And then on the other side of the mountain, you can take your foot off the gas and it seems to go even faster. And that's all part of the journey. And then there's going to be different weather on this journey. Sometimes it's sunny and you're going for it. Sometimes it's raining. And most of the time, what most people do on their path to success is when it starts raining, they say, well, it's raining, I shouldn't drive. But you can drive in the rain. Now, there are times when it's storming in your life, when it's a terrible rain shower coming down, thunderstorm, can't see anything. Let's say you lose a family member. Well, that would be a sign to pull over to the side of the road because that goal can wait a minute. You have other things that are more important to see through before you get back to driving. And just because you pull over to the side of the road doesn't mean that you're less far in your journey. You're not going backwards. You're just taking a minute to handle an important part of your life. And then you're going to get on this journey and you're going to notice that you're excited about getting to where you want to be. And all of a sudden, you'll see construction up ahead. And 4 lanes all of a sudden narrow down to 1. And it's in bumper to bumper traffic. And you, as the big dreamer, you have a couple choices. You can be upset that this place that has a 70 mile an hour speed limit, you're going 0. You can be upset about that, or you can play some T-Swift. I recommend playing some T-Swift. And then what is also part of this journey is you're going to be driving. Let's say you get past the construction zone. And all of a sudden, Google Maps is going to have this interesting thing that pops up and it says faster route available. And that's a sign for, hey, I was doing what I thought I should be doing, but life's telling me to go in this other direction. And so you have a couple choices. You can keep doing the thing that you've known, or you can follow Google Maps, which is always right. And you can follow the faster route to where you want to be and evaluate that situation when the time comes, I guess, to see if it's the right fit for you. But one thing that makes all of this come together is who's in the car with you. Because if you love hiking and you're driving from Chicago to Yosemite and you absolutely love hiking, but the person in the front seat with you hates hiking, they're going to complain and they're going to just be upset the entire time there. So when you get there, you're not even going to want to go on the hike with them. You're not going to see any of the beauty when you get there. And you'll likely want to turn around and go home. And so if you have people in your family that are close to you that maybe are seemingly unsupportive of your goal, buy them a plane ticket after you get there. Your job, or throw them in the trunk. Your job is to go for your vision. And make sure the people that are in the front seat of that car are driven people like Laura. They're people that want to move, that they want to grow. Because that, if you're in a car with people that are obsessed with hiking, that road trip's going to seem like no time. And when you get there, if you do all these things and realize this is all part of going from where you are to where you want to be, then when you get there, you get to get out of the car, go on that hike, you get to that mountaintop or that waterfall, you look around at all the beauty around you, you take it all in, and you celebrate, and you start to wonder, where will we go next? And it becomes this really big, beautiful, amazing journey where your worth was never tied to an outcome. It's just a cherry on top that you get to see all this because there was beauty the entire way. And what's so cool is when you get there and you say where you're going to go next, you can likely do it faster because of all your previous experiences. So this is a metaphor. I call it success GPS. It's a metaphor for getting whatever you want way faster than ever before. You need a ridiculously compelling vision. You need to let go of the stories that are stopping you or telling you you're further back or further along than you really are. And you need to realize that all of these pieces of the journey are part of the journey, and it's not wrong. They're all something to appreciate. And when you appreciate all of them, then you get to where you want to be faster. So I hope that serves today.
I love it. I'm still cringing about the pee bottle. I'm actually, it honestly just makes me laugh that a version of you thought that would be a wise choice. I'm like, as soon as you started saying, I was like, I literally know exactly where this is headed. So that's going to be gross. Well, Brad, that was so helpful. And I think, it's especially valuable coming from somebody who has really been, in the valley and on the mountaintop as far as your business is concerned. And because I do think sometimes people look at someone like you who has this awesome business, a lot of financial success, all of that, and says, well, that's because Brad had some kind of leg up, or he's special and he came from some kind of easier starting point. Like he was driving from Denver to get to Yosemite as opposed to Buffalo.
No, I peed on my face.
Yeah. So I think it's valuable to hear it from someone who has been in some challenging circumstances, even if we're just looking at the financial stuff, because I do feel like a lot of people use their current or past circumstances to then say, well, now because of that, this is what's possible or not possible for me. And so I find it very inspiring that you obviously have moved past the things that have happened to you in the past, the circumstances you were in, the financial state you were in, to a place where that stuff does not affect what's possible for you now in the future. So my hope is that everyone listening can glean from that and say, okay, well, where am I taking my past into my future, and where can I detach that? Because I really do believe that, our past informs our future. It's not like it's totally irrelevant, but it doesn't have to be a limitation on what's possible for us in the future.
Totally agree, my friend. 100% agree with that. I'm so glad it added value. And it's possible for anyone to thrive. I mean, you're going to pee on your face a couple times. Everyone does. But I'm just kidding.
Everyone? I don't know. I don't think I've not done that yet.
Smarter than I am, and don't pee on your own face.
Well, I'm about to have a baby, so I'm sure there will be pee on me at some point in the near future.
There will be. There will be.
Well, Brad, this has been really fun. And I know that you have other things like resources that people can use to take action on what they learned today. So I think you mentioned that there's a quiz that you have that could be valuable for our audience.
I was going to offer my affiliate link to a portable urinal, but no, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I'm
well,
totally kidding.
That I will say, please don't buy that, because that was not an effective choice.
Yes, I do have a quiz. I do have a quiz. So if you're in that place, like we were talking about, where you want a big goal or a big dream, and it feels like you're attached, or you have those inner conflicts, or it feels like your goals seem to evade you, and you're not sure what those beliefs are that are stopping you, or you're at a place where you keep telling yourself stories about where you're at, or maybe you avoid where you're at. And all these parts of the journey you're resisting, and it feels like it's easier for other people than you, or you see some people that seem to succeed almost effortlessly, but it seems harder for you. It might be because of what I call your success archetype. And it's essentially how your conditioning has wired you to think. And so like we talked about, negativity is natural. But once you understand how your archetype uniquely thinks and what you likely uniquely believe, there's 4 types, then what can end up happening is you can clearly see a path to changing it way more quickly. And so the quiz is totally free. It's like 60 seconds long. You just answer a couple quick questions that will show you what your unique success archetype is, and that will set you on a path to actually succeeding faster than ever before. So we have that in the show notes, or you can find it at quizzes.bradbizjack.com. But I hope it serves you. It's helped thousands of people, and I know it will help you as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely check it out since I want to know what my archetype is. And because, like I said before, Brad's in the mastermind with me, and just seeing what he's been able to accomplish in his business is very inspiring. And I'm like, listen, there's something that he's got that I got to get into. So I'm going to go check that out. But Brad, this has been so fun to chat with you today. And thank you so much for bringing so much value to our audience. And thanks for all of you listeners hanging out with us. And we will see you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Hey there, Laura here again. If you're anything like the hundreds of health and nutrition entrepreneurs that I've worked with over the past few years, you want to create an efficient, structured, and organized online health office that saves you time, maximizes your impact and your income, and provides a great experience for your clients. But maybe you've been told falsely that all you need is free tools like Google Calendar and Google Drive to make that happen. Or maybe you know that you need to use a client management software like Practice Better, but you feel overwhelmed trying to figure out how to set it up in a way that actually saves you time rather than wasting it. Either way, the fact is you need a well-oiled client management system, one that works for you like a team member if you want to have a successful online health and nutrition business. And in my brand new free training, I'm going to teach you the 6 essential steps to set up Practice Better for a more profitable and efficient virtual health and wellness business. I'll give you the step-by-step system for setting up your client management software that will get you out of the day-to-day admin work and back into the role of the high-level health and nutrition professional where you belong. I'll also show you how my client Jackie used these exact principles to help her make over $200,000 in revenue in her first full year of business, while also preparing to become a first-time mom. And by the end of this 60-minute training, you'll finally know the best way to create an efficient, structured, and organized online health office that saves you time, maximizes your impact and income, and provides an amazing front-end experience for your clients and customers. To get access to this exclusive brand new training, go to practicebettertraining.com and select the training day and time you'd like to attend. And don't worry if you can't make any of the times listed. We'll be sending the replay to all registrants, so just be sure to look for an email from hello@lauraschoenfeldrd.com to get your personal link to join the training. Having a well-organized client management system is a non-negotiable when it comes to building a financially successful online health business that doesn't burn you out. And I can't wait to show you the exact steps to doing so in the fastest and most efficient way possible. Go to practicebettertraining.com to sign up now, and I look forward to seeing you on the training.